So I don't have to write this citation out again. I just say see note 5 above because it's the same citation. Okay? Um, and we're going to talk about what exactly to put in these footnotes and what the format of those should be. All right, so some things that you will notice are maybe a little bit different than MLA. So the location and publisher are in parentheses. Okay, so I have New York, Macmillan Publishers. In MLA style, this would not be in parentheses. Okay, but in Chicago style, I put that in parentheses. The date has commas on both sides rather than periods. Obviously, this is like a tiny thing, but worth mentioning. So, like here, I have a comma, um, and oh, this should actually be a comma. Yikes. All right, I'll fix that. Anyway, so it should be commas on either side. And you'll see that this says last modified January 11th. Because you always want to use the most recent date. So in this case, January 11th. So even if it was published at a different time, I would want to use the last modified date if that's provided to me. And then, of course, note that a repeated source doesn't have to be cited twice. You just say see note 5 above. If you continue to use a source throughout your essay, so for example, if I kept using this source throughout my essay, but I move on to a new page, the footnote would just be the first word of the citation. I don't have to write out that whole citation again, right? So I could be like, 7 Giroux, 8 Giroux. If I had page numbers, I would include those as well, okay? So I would just, if I had page numbers, I'd say, Giroux, comma 12, Giroux, comma 38, but that's only if I have them. All right, so just a quick reminder on that. If I use the same source on the same page, I just have to write, C note whatever above. If I use the same source but I go onto a new page, I just write the first word of that footnote. Usually it'll be the last name. If there's no last name provided, it would just be like the first word of the article. Okay, so here are some guidelines for writing a bibliography. Okay, so one thing to note, even though footnotes include the whole citation, you still have to have a bibliography, right? So in MLA, you just have one small part of the citation, like the last name or the name of the article that goes in parentheses. With footnotes, you put the whole citation, but you also have to put the whole citation at the end in the bibliography. Okay, so this is just some things to know about the bibliography, and I've highlighted the things that are different between Chicago and MLA. So the first page of your list of sources, right? So where you would write works cited, you would actually write bibliography. Leave 2 blank lines between bibliography and your first entry, 1 blank line between remaining entries. A lot of these are like tiny little technical things where if you don't do this exactly, it's not a big deal. Like if you put 1 line between bibliography and your first entry, it really doesn't matter that much. But for the sake of precision, I'm just going to point out all of the little things. List the entries in letter by letter alphabetical order according to the first word in each entry. Okay, so just like an MLA works cited page, your bibliography is in alphabetical order. It's not in the order that you used the sources, right? So even if you have like a source, that's number 1 superscripted, right? So it's your first footnote. That doesn't mean it goes first on your bibliography. The bibliography is still going to be alphabetical order. When a source has no identifiable author, cite it by its title, both on the bibliography page and in shortened form throughout the text. So again, like if I have a footnote and then I repeat that source later, I could just use like the first word of the article to refer to it, right? So like here I say Giroux because that's the last name. If I didn't know his last name, I could just, when I repeat the footnote, I could just put the first word of the article. All right, make sure to write out the publisher's name in full. If you're citing a website, use the most recent date listed. Okay, so that's when I talked about up here when it said last modified. That's because it's the most recent date. Okay, so this is a little different than MLA. So if an article was published on April 2nd but updated on August 3rd, I would use the August date, not the April date. And I don't need to use access dates unless there is no publication date, no last modified date, right? So sometimes you'll come across an article that has no date associated with it. If that happens, you include the day that you accessed it, right? So the day that you looked at that source. But other than that, you don't need to worry about your access date. If you have to put an access date because there's no other date, put it right after the name of the publication, not at the end of the entry. So in MLA, you have to put the access date and it has to go at the end. In Chicago, it comes right after the name of the publication. So here it's in a magazine called The Conversation. So right after that, I put my access date. And then you'll notice that my date is in standard format rather than that kind of wacky MLA format. So it should be spelled out and written in standard fashion, January 12th, 2018, versus the MLA 12 Jan 2018. Okay? All right, so those are all of the basics. I'm going to show you guys a sample bibliography. And then I'm going to create a second video where I do a step-by-step of how to add footnotes, okay? So it sounds complicated if you've never done it before, but it's actually, it's really easy. Most computer programs will just have an insert footnote thing, and then it'll put the superscript in for you. It'll create a spot at the bottom of the page for you to write in your footnote, and then you just have to write in your citation. Okay, so I'll create another video for that. Anyway, so the sample bibliography, just some things to note. Again, most of it looks a lot like MLA. So, I have the title, the website, the name of the website. There was no date associated, so there's an access date, right? But it's not at the end like with MLA. It's right after the name of the publication, and there are commas on either side of the date instead of periods, and I spelled it out, right? I wrote it in standard fashion, April 11th, 2019. Here, again, almost identical, but I wrote out the date here, put commas on either side, didn't include an access date at the end. Same thing here. Same thing here. Yeah, so for these first 5, really the only thing to note is the difference between the dates and just that like minor punctuation thing. And then for this last one, this is, it's a book. It's the Underground Railroad. You can obviously use this when you create your own because, you're going to have this citation. Only thing that's different here is that my location and the name of my publisher are in parentheses. Okay, so that's really the only difference here. And in Chicago style, you can write print at the end to show that it's a print publication. You don't have to, but you always can. All right, so really the only difference here is that it's in parentheses. Okay. All of this is on Blackboard, so if you want to look at it, get kind of a more comprehensive view of it, go for it. And now I'm going to do a step-by-step of inserting footnotes.